This story is presented by Creepy Mystery. Daniel Grayson awoke to an unsettling silence. His body felt strange, heavier in some places, lighter in others. When he tried to rise, his limbs responded sluggishly, as if unfamiliar with movement. A dull ache spread through his joints, and a wave of nausea washed over him. He swung his legs over the bed and staggered to the mirror. What he saw stole the breath from his lungs. His reflection was foreign. His once warm brown eyes had darkened to a void-like black. His skin stretched pale and taut over his bones. His fingers, elongated and bony, twitched at his sides. But worst of all was his mouth. It was wrong. Lips too thin, too colorless, barely concealing jagged teeth that hadn't been there before. Daniel gasped and stumbled backward. The room tilted as he gripped the dresser for support. This had to be a nightmare. He had been feeling exhausted for weeks. Maybe this was a fever dream? He splashed cold water onto his face, willing his vision to clear, but nothing changed. The hollow version of himself stared back, something lurking behind those dark, alien eyes. A knock at the door. His mother's voice, gentle but distant. "Daniel? Are you awake?" He hesitated, throat tight. How could he face her like this? I'm not feeling well," he croaked, his voice strange to his own ears, as if something else had spoken through him. Pause. Then, "All right, sweetheart. I'll leave some tea by the door." He listened to her retreating footsteps, a creeping sense of dread curling in his stomach. The world outside his room suddenly felt fragile, as if it might shatter if he stepped beyond his threshold. But his hunger gnawed at him, an unfamiliar and insatiable need twisting inside. His stomach rumbled, not for food, but for something else, something he didn't want to name. As the days passed, Daniel withdrew further. His room became a cocoon of darkness, the curtains drawn, the mirrors covered. His mother knocked every morning, leaving food that went uneaten, replaced by a craving he could neither understand nor resist. The first time it happened, it was an accident. A spider had crawled onto his desk, its tiny legs skittering in mindless motion. Without thinking, he snatched it up and crushed it between his fingers. A warm, metallic scent filled the air, and before he knew it, his tongue darted out, tasting. The sensation sent a shiver through him, horrifying yet satisfying. His body craved more. The hunger only grew. Moths drawn to the dim glow of his lamp, a mouse scurrying beneath his bed. Each encounter left him more horrified at himself, yet powerless against the compulsion. He was becoming something else, something monstrous. At first, he tried to deny it. He paced his room, whispering reassurances to himself, telling himself it was all in his head. He thought about calling a doctor, but how could he explain this? That he was craving things no human should? That his body was transforming into something unrecognizable? So he did nothing, and the hunger festered. One night, he awoke to the sound of scratching, not from outside, but from within. His own fingers scraped against the wooden floor, his nails longer, sharper. He bit his lip to suppress a cry, tasting coppery blood, but instead of disgust, a deep, primal satisfaction coursed through him. He clutched his hands to his chest, shivering. He needed to hold on to what was left of himself. His mother knocked again, her voice laced with concern. "Daniel, I haven't seen you in days. Please, let me in." He pressed his forehead against the door, fingers curling into claws. He wanted to reassure her, but he knew she would scream if she saw him now. His body was betraying him, skin pulling tighter, joints clicking unnaturally. The hunger twisted inside him, coiling tight like a snake. His mouth salivated. "Daniel, please," she pleaded. "Just open the door. Let me see you." His hands shook as he reached for the doorknob, but something inside him screamed not to. He clenched his fists and forced himself to turn away. I'm fine, Mom," he said, his voice strained. "I just need more rest." A long pause, then her voice softer now. "Okay, but I'm here, sweetheart. Whatever you need." He listened to her footsteps retreating, guilt slicing through him. He wanted to reach out, to let her in. But if he did, would she recognize him anymore? The nights blurred together. His senses sharpened in strange ways. The rustling of leaves outside, the heartbeat of the mouse in the walls, the whisper of his mother's breathing from the hallway. He could smell the salt of her skin, the warmth of her presence. And the hunger was unbearable. One night he lost control. It was just a small thing. A bird had perched on his windowsill, injured, its wing bent at an unnatural angle. He had stared at it for what felt like hours, his breath shallow, his fingers twitching. Then, before he could stop himself, he lunged. His teeth sank into fragile bones, warm blood filling his mouth. The bird's final cry was cut short, and Daniel gasped, horrified at what he had done. But his body trembled with relief. His reflection in the window was something unholy. Dark eyes, sunken cheeks, jagged teeth stained red. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, but the taste lingered. He collapsed onto his bed, body curling in on itself. What was he becoming? The final straw came when his mother left a plate of food outside his door, the scent of it wafting in. The aroma did nothing for him, but something else caught his attention. The scent of her. So close, so warm, so alive. The hunger surged, more violent than before. He clenched his teeth, fists digging into his palms, nails nearly drawing blood. If he let this continue, he wouldn't let that happen. With a trembling breath, Daniel understood. There was no going back. He had been hollowed out, replaced by something ancient and ravenous. He couldn't stay here. He had to leave before he hurt the only person who still cared about him. He stood, barely steady on his feet, and approached the window. His fingers, clawed and trembling, gripped the frame. The night air was cold against his skin, but it soothed the burning hunger within him. Without hesitation, he climbed over the sill and dropped into the darkness below. His mother knocked again, her voice breaking with worry. "Daniel!" But Daniel was already gone, swallowed by the night. And so, Daniel vanished into the abyss of his own metamorphosis, no longer belonging to the world he once knew. What he had become, whether a curse or an evolution, remained a question unanswered. Perhaps, somewhere in the shadows, he still lingers, neither man nor monster, but something in between. Would you recognize him if you saw him? Or worse, if you felt him watching from the darkness? Thanks for watching Creepy Mystery. See you next time.